our team just inherently became more and more remote. So our director of design, she moved to Mississippi. One of our developers started traveling the world with his girlfriend. We had another person move over to London, and we just became more remote. We truly, truly did. And as that started to happen, we realized, okay, having our daily stand-up calls on Zoom fucking sucks for everybody because it's like 5 a.m. for someone or like 11 p.m. for someone, and we're just not going to do that. We're just not going to force folks to work when it's really inconvenient for them. They should be able to live their life, go do what they want, kind of day to day. And so we had been sitting on the idea of Yak for a while. We said, wow, it'd be really awesome to be able to communicate with your voice still and send a voice message and get all like the context, clarity, and beauty that voice provides, just minus like the real time, I guess obligation that like a phone call, puts on you. So we've been noodling on the idea for a while, and then in 2018, Product Hunt. If you don't know what that is, I strongly recommend checking it out. Product Hunt came out with their very first Makers Festival, and Product Hunt is just a community of a bunch of hackers, makers, businesses, people like that, just launching and building really cool stuff that you should know about. And so they had their first competition, and we said, you know what? Thanksgiving break, we got 4 days. Let's throw together like a very, very scrappy version of Yak and just see what happens. So we built V1 of Yak. It was very scrappy, very shitty. It barely worked, but it got the job done. And we submitted it. Just thinking, hey, this is like something cool that like we built, little small agency. Let's just kind of like see what happens, just to like let people know what we're up to, what we can see, what we can do. And then long story short, this is where it gets crazy. We ended up blowing the water out of the competition. The community loved it. We got a wait list of about 3,000 teams inside of like 2 weeks. It was nuts, absolutely nuts. And here we are from little Orlando, Florida. Nobody's fucking heard of us. We have no idea what we're doing. And we're just like, okay. But there's definitely something more to that product. So we're going to continue to pour gas into it and see what happens. So we continue to work on Yak for a couple months. And then I will never forget, January 7th, 2019, we were sitting in our hotel room in Las Vegas, and one of our Yak users at the time had mentioned Adam Draper on Twitter. And for those of you who don't know, Adam Draper is the son of Tim Draper, OG Silicon Valley, SpaceX, Tesla, Facebook, Uber, all the big companies. And Adam was like, yo, I think what Yak is really tight. I'm going to like hit you up. So he DM'd us his cell phone number. And within 5 minutes, me and my co-founders are on the phone with Adam Draper, not like expecting anything to happen. We're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. We're like, act cool, kind of putting on that front. So we're on the phone with Adam. And he's just like, hey, I think this is really cool. You guys should work on this full time and I want to fund it. And so and then he got BetaWorks involved, ended up funding our pre-seed in 2019. And we've just been off to the races since. So we had no intention of building a startup. And here we are, just raised a Series A about a month and a half ago. And we have a ton of happy users. So that's kind of the quick backstory.
So it makes sense that you were able to raise that first 1.5 million round, I think you said, because you had all the traction or all the hype from the Product Hunt Festival. But how were you able to raise the round that you guys just did, raising 7.5 million? Because if you think about it, the first round you can raise based on hype. The second round you have to raise based on some type of traction, some type of like, the product is clearly there solving a real problem. So how were you guys able to get to that point?
Yeah, so I want to say kind of one thing ahead of this. So our round was just so unique, and like our deck was so great and our raising story was so cool for this round, is that we actually built our deck on Pitch, and Pitch, like we open sourced our Series A deck. So I'll drop the link here, like after we kind of like finish up, so like everybody can like check out the blog post that Pitch did and the actual deck. But the reason, so seed versus Series A is very interesting. And like you said, Pablo, seed is very focused on like, okay, where's Yak going to be in a couple of years? What's like the story like currently? What's the team? Like, what am I kind of investing in at the ground floor? Series A is much more so like, okay, like, do you got it or you don't have it? And so what we put a lot of emphasis on in our Series A deck, and everyone will see this if you look at it after the fact, is like, hey, here's the people who are using it, how they're using it, and why they love it every day. It wasn't so much, hey, here's where we're headed. It's these people are using it really, really consistently. They're power users. They've cut, we even had one team said they now completely take Fridays off because of Yak. It saves them so much time in their day to day. And so that type of storytelling is what we really decided to put in the deck. And that's really what we were able to raise on the back of, showing people, hey, here's who's using it today. Here's why, they need it in their life. And here's where we're going to be in the future.
Awesome. And then I think I remember you mentioning that you guys were running out of cash and you had an offer on the table and it fell through. And then you were
Yeah.
able to raise that round. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So this was really interesting. This was actually our seed round. So we had raised the small pre-seed from Adam in BetaWorks, and it was a fine chunk of change, but like, it's nothing to like seriously build the back of a business on. And when we were heading into our seed round, and we had a lead investor from Silicon Valley, big, I won't say names, but like big, well-known firm. And they're like, yep, we're going to do a $3 million seed round. It's going to be awesome for you guys. Here, let's roll. We had been to all the follow-on investors. I got all of them lined up. Everything was ready to go, literally just waiting on signatures. And I will never forget this. Justin and I were in his car leaving the office. We were just like going back to his house to like hang out or something, like, have a couple beers or whatever. And the guy from this big firm calls us and he goes, hey, so guys, I got some news. And the way he's talking, he's speaking in this tone. I'm like, oh, fuck. Like, what is this going to be on a Friday afternoon? He's like, yeah, so, the partners, they're just really concerned that you guys aren't in Silicon Valley. And, they think you guys aren't going to be able to compete kind of with the talent that you have in Florida. And if you're not willing to relocate, we just can't make it work. And our stance was basically like, we've been in Florida our whole life. We're going to build a remote company. Yak is a remote tool. We're going to like stick it to you and build something really fucking awesome. So the offer fell through at the last minute. And this is around like Christmas time. This was probably like 5 days before Christmas. And so, everybody's on holiday. It's impossible to get in contact with someone. And then randomly, I was like, you know what? Well, we don't really have an option. We're going to either go raise this next round, or Yak's going to be a very short-lived company, about less than a year. And so honestly, I just started DMing people on Twitter, and luckily enough, by the grace of God or the universe or whatever, our existing lead investor from our seed round happened to be a Virginia Tech fan, and one of my friends happened to play football at Virginia Tech. So I was like, hey, you're a Virginia Tech fan. One of my boys like happens to play football there. Let's talk about it. And we just started talking and kind of chopping it up. And a couple of weeks go by, and he's like, you know what? I like want to meet you guys. So he like that day flew down to Orlando. We went to go play a round of golf at Top Golf. And he was like, you know what? I'm in. I will do your seed round. And that's how it came together. But it was really scary because, you don't know what to do. 5 days before Christmas, the bank balance is kind of low. We need the money. This guy is like, screw yourself. You're not going to move to Silicon Valley. And we had to figure it out. And that's kind of the story for the seed round and how it came together.
Awesome. And then, so going back to your Series A that you just raised, I'm guessing that you guys raised that completely remote. Could you talk about how that process worked? How'd you get in touch with the firms, and how many times did you speak to them, or did you meet them in person? All of that.
Yeah. So what's funny is that all of the Series A stuff, our new lead investor for Series A, we never met in person once. And what's funny is that we still have existing investors that we've never met in person, even all the way back from our seed rounds. I'm heading to Miami this weekend, and I'm hoping by chance I can meet one of our investors, because he's been an investor for a couple of years now. And we've still just never met in person. So trying to make that happen. But yeah, raising remote is really, really interesting. I think it's a little easier for us, I will say, because like Yak is a remote first company. Like it's very on brand for us to like raise remotely. But in general, I will say right now, it's very easy because of like the pandemic, because of quarantine. Everybody's realizing like, oh, I don't have to do these meetings in person. Like I can just literally hop on a call and like explain, here's what I'm doing. You can have these fundraising conversations. And really all I think it is, I think the biggest key is just like networking. And I always talk about this, is like the power of Twitter. So like a bunch of our investors we've met through Twitter. And if it wasn't for that, I don't think the Series A round would have come together as is. And so it's kind of twofold to answer your specific question, Pablo. So there's some backstory that I need to hop into it in a minute, but Slack invested in our Series A, and having Slack be involved honestly unlocked a lot of doors for us. Being able to go to these big firms and say, well, Slack's investing. They all go, oh, well, shit, maybe we should invest too. Maybe you guys are kind of up to something. And in general, that's just like a really great fundraising tactic. Having that like one person who's like going to lead it and is committed makes it very, very easy to well, I say very easy. I put an asterisk next to that. It makes it relatively easy to bring in other follow-on investors and kind of get that round together and make it happen. Um, so when you think about raising remotely, I really think the biggest key there is just networking. And I'd say between Twitter and Clubhouse right now, it's incredibly easy. And the market is so full of money that if you need to go raise right now, I mean, this is literally the opportunity, the golden moment to do so.
Awesome. And then last question, then I'll let our founders start asking questions. What was that process like? You mentioned that when you first put together the product, it was for this competition. You guys whipped it together in like 2, 3 days. How did you guys, what did your product feedback iteration loop look like? And how did you guys like, were you guys constantly interviewing users? Like, how did that look like for you guys to improve the product to the point where you were able to raise that Series A?
Yeah, so I think there's a big kind of misconception out there that a lot of founders really get. It's like in the very early days, you need to keep feedback loops like really tight and like, don't like talk to everybody and get as much feedback as possible. And sometimes like I would even say the opposite, because like nobody knows what you're building until it's built and until they've used it. And what will happen a lot of times is people like to give context and feedback based on like their own experiences or like what they know to be true already. And it sounds so cliche, but like if you think about back to like Steve Jobs, like the iPhone, like the iPad, or like, any of those things, people would have been like, dude, like you're fucking crazy. Like you need like physical, tangible buttons. But like, not until you experience it or like use the product do you realize, oh, hey, like this is actually a better version or a better way of doing so. And that was kind of the case with Yak, to be honest. We had a bunch of these moments where people were like, oh, voice will never work, or like you need text as well, or like it's got to do this, it's got to do that. And you just start hearing so much in the early days. It's like, okay, let me take a step back. Let me think about, okay, who am I building for and what am I actually building? So from a feedback perspective, what we did is we kept it really tight. We found the 5 core people who were just like crushing their usage. I mean, like absolutely in there every day. And, even if you were that 6th person and you were still up there, we only listened to the top 5 people. And we did that for months and months and months until the team started to grow into a point where it's like, okay, let's kind of like be open to other ideas as well. Let's think about, a Zapier integration. Let's think about having, a web app as well. Let's think about how we can like better optimize our like push notifications and stuff like that. So what I like to say is like in the early days, kind of stick to what get a product out there. And then, after you see some sort of traction, then start to be open to feedback from your top users and like cater to what those people actually want.
Awesome. All right. Questions are open from anybody.
Yeah, happy to talk anything.
Man, not really a question, but I just got to commend your perseverance in that story. It's really awesome. It's always motivating and puts a lot of, rekindles the fire, when you hear stories like this. So that's awesome. Congratulations.
I appreciate that, man. Yeah, it was scary for sure, but glad it came together. And that's what I like to tell people too, is like, as an entrepreneur, like sometimes you don't really have an option. Cause like, I think about it in the sense of like, okay, we have employees, we have people who are like trusting us with like their paycheck or like, eating dinner that night or like something like that. So you got to do what you got to do for the people who believed in you as well. So I appreciate that.
So I have a question kind of about earlier on in your journey. So I noticed you didn't come from like an engineering background. So when it came to like technical execution, did you just kind of put all of your faith in really eggs on like your technical partner, or did you do contractors, or what did that look like?
Yeah. So I like to say like, okay, I'm not technical enough, like enough in that I would go write the entire app myself, but like I know enough to like be dangerous, and like I know enough to like if I look at code, I'm like coherent and I can like speak to it very well.
Right.
And having that agency background for 6 years helped a lot, because like I was building so many products for other people. It's just like it was just kind of like the next natural progression. So from like a technical execution standpoint, I mean, yeah, a lot of it at the end of the day was just like, okay, let me trust my co-founders and like the team that we have in place to do so. I will say too there, what was nice is that like coming or transitioning from the agency, we did have a lot of like existing employees over there, because like at the time, So Friendly is a very stable business. Like we had been building stuff for massive enterprise companies like Google, Hilton, Marriott, Margaritaville, the list goes on and on. So like I kind of already vetted all of our employees. Like I knew nobody was like going to flop or like not be able to pull it off or whatever. we just kind of already had the team in place. Now in the early days of like building So Friendly and kind of like vetting these employees to, see if they have like the technical chops to make it happen. Yeah, I mean, we were like very largely involved in that. Like, okay, like let's do like, frequent code reviews. Let's make sure like this is working. Let's make sure we're like on schedule, and stuff like that. So.
Gotcha.
Hey, this is Rick. So I have 2 questions actually.
Yeah.
The first one is I just downloaded the app and installed and signed up. I'm just kind of playing with it while you're talking. I have a question on the pricing. So how did you come to the pricing? How much have you played with pricing up to this point? And I mean, there's a lot of questions with pricing I could ask, but I'm just in general, what's your approach on pricing?
Yeah. So right now it's actually very interesting per advice of our investors. And I would actually like very honestly say like we may not be the best reference point. So having just raised that massive round, fortunately, like we don't have to focus on making a ton of cash right now, which is really nice. And per the advice of our investors, they said, well, remember, Jordan, voice messaging is such a new experience. You kind of have to like ease people into it and like focus on getting folks there first. And everybody uses Slack right now, and you definitely can't be more expensive than Slack because that's just going to be everybody's benchmark. So the pricing, a lot of it is kind of centered around, okay, let's just be cheaper than Slack. But I will say, as an asterisk next to that, we've done a lot of work around like, okay, what features are actually paid features versus not. And so like we test that pretty frequently. And we actually have some new stuff that we're about to roll out to see if like those would be good paid avenues for folks as well. So like, paying for a transcription preview, gating how long yaks can be. We test that pretty often. And there's no great solution to it. It's honestly just like, try it for 2 weeks, see what kind of sticks, what doesn't, and just keep iterating based off that.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Right. So you're in the like, we need to have a paid plan just to see who will pay for it, and we can talk to those people. But
Exactly.
yeah, it makes sense. Okay, cool.
Oh, what was your other questions?
So the other question is not totally related to any of this stuff, but on the bottom of your website, you have other products.
Mm-hmm.
So what's that? Are you using
Yeah,
the platform to try the things?
Yeah, so this is interesting. So under the Yak umbrella, kind of as like another paid avenue for us. So we are in SetApp, and for those of you that don't know what SetApp is, SetApp basically like bundles creates all these like different app bundles that you can go and download. So like say you need like dev tools bundle, you can go get that off SetApp. Say you need like the remote work tools bundle, you can go get that off SetApp. And so what we're actually about to do, you'll be some of the first to know, is put a bundle into SetApp that's like, okay, you get 2 Yak seats, you get access to Backtrack, which is another app we made, Serenity, which like silences all your notifications on desktop, like these tools that you would really need to be able to like calmly work remotely or work from home. So that's kind of what the other products are.
Okay, cool. When you were raising, did any of that come up? Were they like, hey, why do you have a bunch of other products?
Yeah, it did. And what we told them is that it's actually kind of like a sales avenue for us. And so like the best story is actually like the Backtrack one. So all of them are completely owned by Yak. And what we tell these people is that, one, it's a really good marketing stunt for us, because people go look at this thing and go, oh, I like found Backtrack. Oh, let me go, like now I can go like find Yak from that. And like same with the other products. So the story for Backtrack is really interesting. So this was when in-person was a thing. I was out in the Valley meeting with a VC, and we were just getting grilled, to be honest. I mean, it was probably the worst VC meeting we've ever done. We were just getting roasted. We had no answers. It's terrible. And I walked out and I looked at my co-founders. I was like, shit, I wish we recorded that. So Backtrack is this product that we came up with that constantly overwrites the last 60 minutes of audio on your desktop. That like helps you like record those moments where you're like, oh man, like I wish I recorded that. So it's like on brand for Yak, and just again another sales avenue for us.
Gotcha. Cool. All right. So it's like the street term is it's like the crack dealer for Yak. You get everybody hooked to it, and then you get them in there. That's cool. I
Yeah.
like it.
Appreciate that, man.
I like that idea.
So I think I have a question. I'm very interested in like what kind of creative marketing strategies do startups that really gain a lot of hype? What kind of things that they do, So for you, in terms of like getting this hype, was it basically more of like Twitter, or were there some like different creative strategies that you used to actually get these users to use your product?
Yeah, so there's three really big things that have worked well for us. So one, in general, Twitter. Honestly, just like talking about our product, what we do, how we're gonna like win, remote work tips, like just stuff that we've learned. Kind of like there's this like new fad right now, like building in public. That's like essentially what we do. The second is product hunt in the community there. So like I just talked about it a little bit with Backtrack, but like what we used to be notorious for at So Friendly is building products as kind of like viral marketing stunts. And so this is a funny story. So when the Colin Kaepernick meme was a thing a couple of years ago, and like there was the meme about like his face being put on stuff. So there's a meme generator. We were the ones who built the meme generator where you could like put your own face on it and like your own stupid caption that was like, I support whatever. And that brought us a ton of traffic, and everyone was like, oh my God, these are the guys who are able to do this. And so the same logic kind of applies to our own companies of like, oh, build something that will go super viral that like gets you traffic back to your own company. And Product Hunt is really, really great for that. And the community is really strong there. So just like interacting with those people, building really awesome stuff, and kind of just taking part is great. And then third is we're very good at building kind of faux hype and exclusivity. So by that, I mean, so when you download Yak, you get a unique Yak username, which will be like, so like I have yak.com/Jordan. So if you type that into your browser right now, you're like, oh my God, he's got @Jordan on Yak. What we really did is just made like a fancy CMS item on our website that looks like everybody's got a unique username. But in fact, it's just this very surface level thing that makes people feel really good. So what we were telling people on Twitter is like, hey man, like I just got you like yak.com/Peter. Like you got like your first name, like, and people were like, oh my God, like there's no way I got like my name. So like doing things like that to like make people feel like it's like a really exclusive experience that they're getting access to, was massive for us. If you just go to Twitter and you search like yak.com/, I'm sure you will just get hundreds of results. Everybody was posting their username one day. And in fact, like a lot of VCs were like, even like, hey, pitch me at yak.com/Adam, or like pitch me at yak.com/Dylan or whatever. So those three things have just been absolutely killer for us.
By the way, did that help with your SEO as well?
Oh yeah, 100%. It was the ultimate hack, dude. It was the ultimate hack.
Cool.
That's awesome. So another question on the usage of this. So it sounds like your investors kind of touched on some of this, where this is new and you got to try to educate people and create new habits. And creating new habits is hard, but it's so valuable when you do. So what's some of your strategies on trying to create new habits and stuff?
Yeah, so kind of like the golden opportunities for Yak are, you got to add at least 2 other people to your Yak for like a total of 3 folks instead of a Yak. And then creating channels, which is what we essentially equate to groups, very similar to Slack. And sending messages in there is like where you really start to see the like aha moment of like why you would send a voice message instead of just slacking it or like picking up the phone and calling someone. And what I'm telling people is just like start off kind of replacing like your quick hits. So like instead of having that stand-up call or like sending a stand-up inside of Slack or whatever, or just an update, just send a Yak instead. Just do that for a week and you'll be like, oh my God, why was I not sending voice messages before? And what's funny is that we'll see people do that and then your Yaks will be like 30 seconds to 2 minutes. And then at like day 6, it goes to like 8 minutes. And then like after that, people are sending Yaks up to like 30 minutes and they're like, oh my God, this is like so nuts. So yeah, those are my 3 biggest tips for you. And we can chat offline about it too. I'll add you to my Yak and we can chat there.
Nice.
I'm curious with adopting your first customers, how did you solve this chicken and egg problem? Like Yak's only valuable when there are other Yakkers. Like, I have this like I'm developing I came a little late, so like my thing's like a social networking kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I need people to be on at the same time. So async wouldn't really work.
Yep.
What advice do you have there?
So what we've done really well is kind of like influencer marketing, if you will. So like we'll pay people, we'll be like, so like there's this one guy on the platform, his name's Justin F. He'll talk to anybody on Yak and he's on there every day, just like constantly getting involved. And we're like, dude, like we'll give you like $1,000, just be in there and like kind of like be active, or he doesn't have to be $1,000, just like something. So it looks like there's like organic people outside of like your team in there as well. Obviously, I'm in there every day. My co-founders are in there every day. And now it's gotten to a point where it's like we don't have to be, but like literally like week one, that's what we were doing. Just like, hey, like get in here, get involved. Hey, get in here, get involved. Or like asking our investors. And that tends to solve the problem a little bit. But a lot of it is just going to be your work that you do and you being active in there as much as you can, kind of day in and day out. The other thing too that worked really well for us is kind of having like structured events. So like early on, we did like an AMA inside of Yak, and Yak is definitely not designed for an AMA at all. But one, it unlocked us a lot of new users, and two, it got a lot of people in there at the same time. So it looked like, you know, there was a lot happening in Yak at the time when in fact there was like, you know, 50 people or whatever. So events are a really great way to do that.
I like all of that. How did you get people to those events?
Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, bunch of Facebook ads. So we're not really like big like on Facebook, just like making a generic post, but like Facebook ads for sure. Twitter, definitely. I guys like literally can't emphasize Twitter enough, how important it is. And then Instagram ads as well. Those are really the only three.
That's helpful. Sorry, I don't mean to like dominate the conversation by asking a third question, but
we can chat about it too offline. Like I'm like super interested in that space as well. So like,
for sure, I love that. Yeah.
Okay.
I was just gonna ask, like, did you hire? This is a random question. Did you hire like a social media someone to run social media?
This is also a fucking crazy story. So our social media guy is just like some college kid, or at the time he was, who randomly cold emailed this was even before cold emailed my so friendly email, was like, look, can I just like have like 15 minutes of your time to like chop it up? Like, can you like help me with my business? I was like, dude, yeah, like I remember when I was like 18, like come to the office, like I'll hook it up for you. So they came to the office and this kid started showing up at our office more. And I was like, who the fuck is this kid? Like, you know, someone told him to go away. And eventually he just showed up so much. I was like, okay, like, do you want a job? And we like discovered that he was like really good at social. And this is where we just got like lucky, I guess. He made a video on TikTok that, I mean, that's just gone completely viral. I mean, his videos now average like probably like 50K views a video. Like he's like a full-on influencer now working for us. I'm just like, what is happening here? So I say that to say like, yes, we have someone who does socials full-time, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok now, Facebook, and then also does like content creation. Like Emilio, his literal job is just to like be making videos all day. So yeah.
That's helpful. Thanks.
For sure, dude.
I'm curious to hear a little bit more about hiring practices. Particularly, I know like during COVID right now, everything's been remote. You know, what have you seen building a team during this time? Are you bullish on, you know, people kind of being back together, or do you think it's environment works best at these early stages?
So I do think there's something to be said about being together in person. I think in the early days, it is possible to do it remotely. My stance though, just to be clear, is like, I think hybrid is going to be what everybody's going to do. What I think is going to happen is everybody's going to go back to the office once the entire world's vaccinated. Be like, oh my God, I missed you so much. And then we'll realize like, oh man, like everybody like, oh man, like I wish I could work from home today. So like, I think we'll kind of land somewhere hybrid. But particularly around hiring, I mean, honestly, what we've done right now is just kind of like the rest of the world, make do with the best that you can. It's like I just hired a girl in California. Obviously, I can't go meet with her in person, but like we need to hire this person. I just don't really have an option. So just like doing as many, you know, conversations, interviews, like as you can get, without being intrusive. And that's really it. Like, I know it's a sucky answer, but that's just really it. Just like telling that person, hey, like, let's talk, and just like forcing the conversation, if you will. One thing that we have started doing, not to like promote my own product, but like inside of Yak, is like doing like a daily question. And that just like helps with team building too. Like you can even do that inside of Slack. There's like even some bots that do that. That just says like, you know, we debate stupid stuff like, does pineapple belong on pizza? And then the other question of the day was like, what was the craziest dream you've had? Just like small stuff like that to like help team building in this remote world has really been beneficial, because it kind of like shows you, okay, like there's an actual person behind that screen, not just like a worker, if you will. So
as you are trying to recruit some talent in person, you know, particularly being in a place that's maybe not so much considered like the hot spot, like Silicon Valley, for example, of like everyone and their mother working on a startup. What's your advice on like trying to convince people to like potentially move to a new area, or has it maybe instead just been like tapping into local talent networks instead?
I'm massive on tapping into local networks. I think what's happening in Silicon Valley right now is really interesting. It's like a lot of people are leaving. Like a lot of the big time people are leaving, and people are discovering, oh, hey, like there's actually really great talent literally elsewhere in the world. So like our lead designer on Yak, Heather, she's fantastic, and she's just like here, like from here in Orlando. Like she was just born here, and so I think there is really good local talent everywhere. I think I will say I do think there's something to be said about like hiring Valley talent that has like a name to it, if you will, or like some of the clout that comes with that. And that's sucky, but like, I think if you have, one person on the team who can do that, then sure, fine. But like for the most part, I think there is local great talent everywhere in the world. Some of our best engineers are just like from literally anywhere else. So yeah, I think Silicon Valley is more at this point is more of like representative of this like online world and kind of like tech in general, not physically where are you at in the world right now.
Super interesting. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, man.
I had a question on the communication with your team, kind of when you were at like the end of the runway. Did you have like, a talk with everybody like, hey, we're running out of cash, we need to make something happen? Or did you kind of just like have the conversation like, hey, everything's good, we're going to keep pushing?
No, no. We told everybody. So like, just to be clear, like I will always take the stance of like in a startup, you should be as transparent as you can. Like our company literally knows anything that's happening, like everything that's happening. Like I would tell anybody, like we're not secretive at all. So like when that happened, we're like, yeah, like, okay, this like fell through, like we need to figure it out. Just cause like, I don't know, I truly believe in us as a team, not like founders, employees. We're just like all the same people. And especially that early stage, like people love to say like CEO or like founder. And it's like that stage, it's like such bullshit. Like it doesn't matter. It's like super irrelevant. Like, okay, you're a founder with 2 employees, like congrats. So yeah, I'm just always a fan of like, be very transparent with people.
So I have a question kind of about earlier on too. Did you have any like revelation or something you found surprising that maybe wasn't necessarily what you would have assumed?
Let's see. I guess honestly, like I knew fundraising was going to be hard. I didn't realize how hard fundraising can be and like how taxing it can be. So just like in general in fundraising, you're just literally going to get more no's than yeses by just like of how it works. And like hearing those like a ton of no's just over and over and over again about your own thing kind of gets discouraging because you're like, damn, like, am I building the wrong thing? Like you start to second guess yourself a little bit as a founder. And you're just like, what? Like, is this really the right move? So that was a bit surprising for me. And then also how much, I guess, like signaling matters in like building your company, which like I hate playing the game of like, look at me, we're cool. But you wouldn't believe after like our seed round, TechCrunch did a big piece on us. How many people were like, oh my God, Yak is like the greatest product in the earth. And these people have like never used it, like never like believed in us before. And it's just like so weird. It's like literally nothing has changed about the product, but like you were acting like this is like the second, the universe is being recreated here. So it's weird to see how much signaling matters. And then really how hard fundraising can be. But I think if you kind of know that going into it, these things are much more stomachable.
Gotcha. And then on the same kind of thread with fundraising, once you got like your first yes, would you just kind of keep that person in a loop over the course of like the weeks, right? Like, would you be sending them updates and all that stuff, or do you kind of just back up a little bit and let the product speak for itself, or how did you?
No, we communicate with them that entire process. So like, and in general, usually if you find that first lead investor, they're like wanting to like get the deal done too. So like they will be like proactive and like making intros, telling you to talk to this person. So like, yeah, when we were talking to GGV and Slack, I mean, they were probably every day, if not every other day, like we were in there, like talking to them like, okay, this is coming together. This person's working on this. yeah, I'd say communicate as much as you can with those people. Because also, I mean, those are the people that are gonna take your business to the next level. They're super networked, and it's absolutely worth it to keep talking to them.
Just a quick question. How long was it from your first interaction with GGV and Slack to the point that you actually got money in the bank from them?
I mean, to be honest, that was pretty quick, relatively speaking. It was like a month and a half for us. The seed investment is more interesting. So like if you go back to the guy who like pulled the term sheet from us, from the time that we started raising to like, you know, when he sent us, that guy who pulled it, gave us a term sheet. I mean, that was a long ass time. That was probably like 6 months. And seed is just much more, it's so much more difficult because like you were selling like what it's going to be, not in, whereas Series A is just very like black and white. It's like, okay, like do you have something or do you not have something? Seed is just so like vision oriented, and that takes a while. And that took about 6 months. The combo with GGV was about a month and a half total for everything. Are there more questions or anything?
Is there any part of the fundraising process, like as a first-time founder, that should be outsourced to like someone more experienced, or like do you just have to like educate yourself?
Definitely get good legal. At first, I was like, yeah, we're just gonna use like this lawyer that I know from here in Orlando. Like it's gonna be good. And when I tell you that we got fucked, that's an understatement. We ended up hiring a legal like who is in tech that like knows the terminology, knows what to do. And it was just, I can't even explain how worth it was. I would recommend that to absolutely everyone. So I will say, like, if you are going to fundraise, find legal, unless you were just like an absolute expert when it comes to that, find legal that like knows what they're talking about and they can handle all of that for you. Because like these documents that you get from investors, I mean, there are tons and tons of pages that like you need to comb through. And like as a founder, you should look through them yourself still. But I mean, there's just so much terminology and jargon in there that it's like I actually, you know, it's hard to decipher. So good legal is well worth the investment. But other than that, I don't think you need anything else.
Any tools or like other pieces of advice for how to like just get those meetings?
Let's see. So you definitely want like a good organized data room in place. And I don't think that gets talked about enough. So a data room is essentially just like, I mean, ours is literally just like in Google Drive that I made. It's literally just like an organized space of like where all important documentation lives. So like, I have a folder that's called like, you know, business, you know, founding documents. That's like our articles of incorporation, our EIN, stuff like that. I have our folder called tax matters, or a folder of like press articles, a folder of like other just like top customers. I don't remember what else is in there. There's like 15 things that I got, but just having that like organized place where they say, hey, I need access to like to see under the hood of the company, that you can just like very easily send them, is really great. And then also making your deck very shareable very easily is also a really good fundraising tactic. So a lot of founders for some reason are like, let me like be secretive with it. They like password protector or whatever. And it's like hard to send to someone because a lot of founders don't realize investors tend to talk to one another a lot. And if they're like, you know, I found this really hot deal, go check this thing out. And they're like, oh, look, it's password protected. It like makes it really hard for that other person to like check it out. And like, who knows, you might have just missed out on something great. So like we actually put our deck at a short link. So if you just like go to yak.media/deck, it's like completely open source and like you can go find it. So yeah, just making that super shareable for people was really awesome.
So I have another question related to the fundraising aspect. So what did your like user growth and then revenue look like from your pre-seed to your seed round? And then if you remember like your Series A.
Yeah, so revenue, I think I had mentioned it, but we truthfully didn't have anything meaningful. We were very focused on like user growth and stuff like that. Actual percentages, let me see if I can find it really quick. Here, let me look through our deck really fast. Give me like a second and I can tell you. But a lot of it was focused on like user growth, who's using it today, how are they using it, and like what's their team, expansion look like. Okay, this doesn't want to load for me, but anyway, I'll find it at some point for you and I'll let you know.
All right, sounds good.
I'm curious about when you guys were raising this last round, what did you say you were going to allocate the 7.5 million for? And did you guys set out to raise 7.5 million? Was that the goal, or was that
Yep.
more or less than you thought? Or
So that was the goal. And what's nice about being in Florida, well, I guess even though we are remote, majority of us being here in Florida, is that like it's just not as expensive to run as like a Silicon Valley company. What's so funny is that like when we're telling our investors like our expected burn, they're like, that's cheap. And here I am, I'm like, that's a lot. Like, what are you talking about? So it's just like very different. So we set out to raise 7.5, and then this round for us is just all focused on like growth, sales, and marketing. So like to date, we've spent maybe like 10K total on like advertising. I told you a lot of the stuff that we would do is around like building these viral products, or like being involved in community, or like engaging with people, like stuff like that is really what our marketing was. Like there's just really no paid avenues. So this round is all focused on growth, sales, marketing, stuff like that.
Is it unappealing to investors to like want that stuff in your pre-seed or seed round? But I want some of my money to go to a growth team. Like we think most of the tech's there. A lot of people have told me that like this should all be going to development. Like you shouldn't be spending anything on marketing.
Yeah, I mean, I would tend to agree with that. It just depends on like where the company's at. Like if you're like a Clubhouse, for example, and you're just like the hottest thing on the block, and you raise, your seed round at like 100 million or whatever insane valuation they raised at, like, yeah, put some money into growth. But if you're like most startups, like where we were, yeah, like just focus on like purely like developing the product, talking to people, making it really great, and then get something really special, and then like go market against that really awesome product.
we'll take like 1 or 2 more questions and then we'll wrap up if anybody has.
Yep, I have a question. So you talked about incorporating. So I wanted to know, at what point did you decide that like this is the right time to incorporate? Was it like just before your first investment, or was it as soon as you have a product out, something like that?
So it was actually right before our first investment. So again, we were a little unique in that we had never planned on, like turning Yak into a company. So like when we had that first initial call with Adam Draper, I mean, we had literally nothing in place. We had no deck, no website. It wasn't its own company. We had no nothing. And then at the point in which Adam said, hey, I want to fund this, we were like, okay, well, literally legally to make this happen, we have to like go incorporate and turn it into its own company. So we really had no option. But the answer is, before your first investment, yes, you will need to incorporate. Like it will need to be its own entity, or they won't fund you.
Got it. Thanks.
Yep.
What's so you have investors that are outside of Florida. Did you try to raise money from people in Florida?
Yeah, so Florida funders is actually on our cap table. I love talking about Florida investors because they are, for whatever reason, very different from any other investors out there. And I'll say this about the Florida funders, guys, because we worked with them a lot on it. A lot of the time, seed investors, especially in Florida, will say, well, we need to see this.
Did he freeze for everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if it was just me. We'll give him a second. Oh, Jordan, you froze. I think you're back.
Oh, audio's out, but he's back.
We can't hear you.
Probably be better off doing this meeting on Yak.
Yeah, we should all just jump on Yak right now and start asking him questions on there.
Not a bad idea.
Looks like he dropped off.
He just joined
All right.
back.
Oh, he did? Okay, cool.
Hey, Jordan, can you hear us?
He told me he'll be back in a second. He said his Zoom is messing up.
Zoom.
Good old Zoom.
Whew. Okay. Hang on. Let's see. Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Oh my God. I guess this is proof why Zoom sucks or like why Yak exists. Anyway, I mean, this is just like a literal case study. This is a real life testimonial for me right here. This is so cool. I'm sorry. What was the question that we're talking about?
You were talking about investors in Florida, and I think you mentioned
yes.
seed funders in Florida, and then
That's right. So so a lot of the times Florida investors tend to say, hey, at seed stage, we need to see this sort of like growth metrics, revenue, whatever. And my response is just like, I just don't think that's practical at the seed stage. So many of these founders this early on are focused on building product, building out the team, and just kind of like discovering what they need. So if you go to a lot of Florida VCs, you know, a bunch of founders tend to get discouraged because they feel like, oh man, like, you know, we're not even close to $1 million in revenue or whatever, and they feel like they can't raise. But if you go elsewhere, I mean, literally anywhere else, these investors are dumping millions into folks with no product, no nothing. And not to say that like you shouldn't have a product that doesn't exist, but like it's possible to go raise without, you know, this insane nutso fully fledged business. And Florida investors tend to very much so lean into revenue numbers, growth, and whatever. And they're just at the seed stage, that's just not practical always.
Yeah, it's like the difference between East Coast investors and West Coast investors.
Yeah, it's very, 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 very different, which is fine. You know, everybody kind of has their own thing. I just don't think if you're investing at the seed stage, I just don't think it's always practical.
Jordan, so we had a question. Mohit basically messaged me because his mic is not working. So I think we'll do this as the last question. And then if anybody else wants to ask Jordan questions, you guys can connect offline. So he said, how close was the first version that you handed out to pilot users from what you were pitching? And how were the first responses? And then what action did you take afterwards?
Oh yeah, see in the chat. How close was the first version that you handed to post? So before our initial launch, or like back when we were still kind of like in our pre-seed stage, what we were pitching was actually pretty close to like what we were actually like what was made. Because at the time, like we had the wait list, it was like invite only. So it was actually pretty close. That version was very close. And then we kind of like scrapped that because it just wasn't built great. It was just, I mean, we hacked it together in 4 days. And then when you kind of look to our seed round product, if you will, I will say that was very different from what actually ended up launching. Not from a functionality perspective, but like our UX was very different. You know, our concept of like teams and friends was all very different. It was just super, super distinct, which is fine. People ended up liking that more. And I think that kind of like answers the second part of your question. Some of the initial responses to like the few beta users that like saw that version, the first version, were like, oh man, like I don't know about that. And these were the power users that I was talking about earlier that like really like loved Yak and like really believed in the power of voice messaging. So we listened to that feedback. It ended up being a great decision on our end. So I think a lot of it is just instinctual. But I think if you just trust those 5 people who just really, really love whatever you're doing, they tend to put you on the right path. So
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jordan. This was super valuable. Really appreciate your time. I think you're going to see a lot more Yak downloads after the session. And yeah, we look forward to keeping in touch with you.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate you having me. I'm on Twitter at Jordan L. Walker. And then I put my Yak link in the chat if you want to hit me up there. Yeah, I'm an open book. Happy to talk about whatever and help out. So let me know, guys.
Awesome. All right. Good night, everyone.
See y'all. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Yep.